Have you ever walked into a room full of people and still felt completely alone? You see laughter in groups of friends, but somehow you're left standing on the outside. And the question creeps into your mind, is something wrong with me? What if nothing is wrong at all? Stay with me. This story might change how you see loneliness forever. In a quiet town where everyone seemed to know everyone, there was a man named Daniel. Every morning was the same. Friends laughed over coffee and co-workers discussed their weekends. But Daniel always sat alone in the corner. Same table, same black coffee, same quiet presence.
Wait, you're kidding.
He wasn't rude. He simply listened more than he spoke. When people don't understand someone, they whisper, "Why is he always alone?
Honestly, the best I've had.
Doesn't he have friends?
I know, right?
He seems kind of
We should
strange."
definitely come back here tomorrow.
Daniel heard those words more times than he could count.
I know, and right here
And
in the
slowly,
cafe.
He started believing them. Maybe something was wrong with
Look at
him.
him.
Because every time he tried to join in,
He knows
something
me
felt
I
off.
can't believe he actually
The
did it.
laughter felt forced. The stories felt shallow. The smiles didn't always reach people's eyes. And deep down, Daniel wondered, why do I feel more alone in a crowd than I do by myself? One afternoon, a group from the coffee shop invited him over. "Hey, Daniel, come sit with us," one of them said. "Don't be such a stranger." For a moment, Daniel felt hopeful. Maybe this was what he needed. Maybe friendship just required trying harder. So he joined them. At first, everything seemed normal. They joked about
Won't believe
sports
what
and
happened
work.
next.
But after a while,
Oh my gosh,
Daniel
tell me
noticed
everything.
something strange.
Wait, did you try
The
new
moment one
latte
person
yet?
left the table, the rest began talking about them, with quiet judgment. They smiled to their faces and tore them down the second they walked away. Daniel sat there quietly, listening, and something inside him felt
Wait,
tight.
you actually did that?
It wasn't anger.
I told you I would.
It was something
It was
closer to
hilarious.
disappointment.
I can't believe
After a
it.
while, he
Look
stood
at
up.
him, he totally noticed us.
"I think I'm going to head out,"
Keep your
he
voice
said
down.
politely.
He looks annoyed.
One of them shrugged.
It's kind of
"Thinks he's too good for us," someone whispered. But Daniel wasn't trying to be better than anyone. He was just trying to breathe. For the first time, he realized something important. Being surrounded by people doesn't always mean you belong. A few weeks later, at the town's summer festival, music played and food trucks lined the streets. Families and friends filled the
This is
space with
incredible.
energy.
The smells, the
Daniel
lights,
tried
it's
again,
everything I
smiling,
imagined and
talking,
more.
and asking
I'm so glad we
questions.
came tonight.
But after an hour, something familiar happened. He felt completely drained. Not tired, drained. Like his mind had been running a marathon. Meanwhile, everyone else seemed energized by the crowd. They laughed louder, talked faster, stayed longer. Daniel left early, walking home under the quiet streetlights. And for the 100th time, the same question returned. Why am I like this? Why does being around people exhaust me? One evening, Daniel sat alone on a park bench, watching the sunset ripple across the water. An older man sat beside him. "You're not much for crowds, are you?" the stranger asked gently. Daniel smiled awkwardly. "Is it that obvious?" The man chuckled. "I've seen that look before." Daniel sighed. "I just wish I was more like everyone else." The stranger shook his head slowly. "Why would you want that?" Daniel looked confused. The man continued. "Some people gain energy from noise, crowds, and constant conversations.
What you're
But
feeling
others,
right now,
like you,
the sadness and the
process the
worry,
world more
means you
deeply.
care.
You notice
Never
things
let it
others
fade.
miss. You think deeper. You feel more. And that takes energy. Daniel sat quietly. No one had ever explained it like that before. The stranger added one sentence Daniel would remember for the rest of his life. You're not broken. You're just wired differently. Something changed after that day. Daniel stopped forcing himself to fit into places that felt wrong. He spent more time walking in nature, reading books, working on projects he loved. And slowly, the silence stopped feeling like emptiness. It began to feel like peace. He discovered something most people never realize. You don't need constant noise to feel alive. You don't need approval to feel valuable. And you don't need dozens of friends to feel connected. Sometimes, one real connection is worth more than 100 shallow ones. Almost a year later, a carpenter named Marcus moved to town. He had recently lost his parents. He also preferred quiet places. One afternoon, he sat down across from Daniel at the coffee shop. Neither spoke much at first, but when they did, the conversation felt different, honest, unforced. They talked about life, loss, dreams, and meaning. Sometimes they even sat in silence,
Everything is going to be fine.
and somehow, that
Just
silence
relax
felt
and
comfortable.
Enjoy your coffee.
Over time, a friendship
I've been thinking a lot
formed,
about what you said.
not loud
Makes
or
sense now.
dramatic, just
Take your
real.
time with it. Sometimes
And
it just
Daniel
needs space to
realized
grow.
something powerful. He never needed a crowd. He just needed the right person. Years later, someone asked Daniel why he didn't have more friends. Daniel smiled calmly. Friendship isn't about how many people know your name. It's about who truly understands your heart. Some people chase attention or popularity, but the strongest people learn something different. They protect their peace. They walk alone when necessary, and they wait patiently for connections that are real. So if you're watching this today, and you feel like you don't fit in, if you feel different, misunderstood, or alone, listen carefully. You are not broken. You might simply be someone who values depth over noise, meaning over attention, and real connection over empty conversation. And that kind of person isn't meant to fit in everywhere. But when you finally find your people, it will mean everything. If this story spoke to you, describe it using just one word. Maybe it's peace, strength, solitude, truth. Drop your word in the comments. I read every single one. It might be exactly what someone else needs to see today. If you enjoy stories that make you see life differently, subscribe to Tales in Life. Because sometimes, the stories that feel the most personal are the ones
you
that
enjoying it
connect
too?
us all.
Yes, it's wonderful. Thank you for bringing me here.